Yeah, I apologize. I had some trouble with it. I'd like to convene the Plan Commission of Shorewood to order at 6:35. We have quorums. Do we have to do roll call?
I don't think
We
so.
don't typically do. Commissioner Flynn post as excused.
The first item is, or the next item after call to order is to approve the August 26th, 2025 Plan Commission meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Pollak, seconded by Commissioner Klein. Yes. All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are adopted as presented. Item 3, consideration of a recommendation for the request by zoning petition to rezone 4449-53 North Oakland Avenue. Item 236-9993-000 from MX1 mixed use storefront to GX1 general residential office units. This item was heard by the Plan Commission in August and is back before us for consideration of a recommendation to the village board. So what we're being asked to tonight, well, obviously Director Griffin talked, but as you'll notice in our materials, we are being asked to provide a recommendation either to deny or approve. Either way, it will go to the village board for a public hearing and then.
Yes, so I have the same slides that I had last time. This is a brief overview of the applicant and his attorney are here once again for the discussion, but it is a request to rezone this particular parcel. As President McKay mentioned, this was introduced for discussion on August 26th. We are here for recommendation tonight on the 23rd. We have scheduled a public hearing before the village board meeting on October 6th, presuming that tonight we can come to a recommendation. If not, we would cancel that and reschedule it, but it's my expectation that I think we can get through that tonight. Once again, they are requesting a rezone from the MX1 to GX1 in order to obtain occupancy for a first floor tenant. Offices are currently prohibited in the first 20 feet of occupied space in the MX1 district, so that use is not allowed at the moment. The property was rezoned as per the commercial zoning update in 2023, at which point it was debated between MX1 and GX1. Ultimately, it was chosen as MX1 in consideration of the storefront building type and the existing retail use that was occupying it at the time. GX was considered because of neighboring uses and a lack of an active cluster, but once again, MX use was the final decision on the task force, the Plan Commission, and the village board who ultimately made that decision. Once again, we're here for recommendations. Staff did meet with the BID Business Improvement District at the end of August. They provided a letter, which is in your packet, stating that they were not in favor of the rezone. We also have received one letter of support and one letter of opposition that are also in your packet. And just as a reminder, if rezoned, retail such as eating and drinking, and artisan manufacturing would be limited. So if we do go to GX1, that does limit those uses in the future. So that is where we're at. We had some questions and answers last meeting, but once again, we're here tonight for discussion and recommendation for the village board consideration on October 6th.
Would you like to come to the table since we have kind of an odd setup today? Like I said, I'd like to ask the applicants if you'd like to be heard on it, provide additional information. We have it covered.
Thank you for open forum. I'm Andy Burkholz. I'm the owner of the building. And since, let me first say that whatever decision is made will be respected. Your opinions are valued. We'll be okay either way. Okay, so let's take a little bit of the steam out of that. So I have a business called Scotty Properties, and through the process, and Bart, you've been incredible. Thank you. I didn't have a PhD in Shorewood zoning code coming into this. I don't now, but I know a lot more now than when I bought the building in April. And I've had a lot of listening sessions, including being invited to the last bid meeting by Janet. And there's a lot of opinions, quite frankly. At the end of the day, my business is to purchase, develop, and ultimately rent properties. And I want to be a really good community partner, no matter the vision that people have for this building, and operate within that building. So this isn't just a building that I'm renting out. I'm going to ultimately look to operate my business within that building. There's no silver bullet. If the board ultimately decides to reject the notion and keep it as MX1, that would mean that the second floor where I rent to my tenants, ultimately I'm going to remodel the building, and the tenants would be out. I do know that one of the objectives of Shorewood is to find more apartment and rentals, including across the street from me. Probably figure out something to make a retail space work in the first floor of the things that I want to do. That would not be ideal. I really looked at the building for something that I could kind of keep as is and ultimately operate my office within, which I could do on the second floor. But that's also less than ideal field as well. So I'd like to be able to gain occupancy to do that and operate an office there. I've looked at other office space in the area too as well, that from last meeting. And I've looked at this a lot of different ways. And the request for rezoning was ultimately because I operate an office, which would be something that the public can engage with at some level here when people come in and discuss about their own rentals that they may want to rent through my business and things like that. I'd be happy to answer any kind of questions that people have or that they have about it. But like I said, with my first comments, no matter what people's opinions are, I'll try to make my best to make it work. Ultimately be a great community partner here in Shorewood. And if the board elects to reject, I'll probably ultimately look at going to the second floor, which is a loss of apartment units there. And those tenants have been in my building for some time. That's the deal. And if they accept, I'll ultimately take the first floor and renovate that area for full office space and keep the tenants on the second floor pretty much as is.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? All right, let's see, I was just checking the date of Director Henning's letter to us, which was August 25th, and my understanding is you attended the bid board meeting last week. I believe they convened.
Yep.
Was the feedback and or tenor of the discussion any different from what's in this letter?
No, it's very much, I would say, I don't think it's a feels kind of like a 50-50 proposition when I was there. There's certain voices that have been a part of the Shorewood business community for some time that had expressed and got me caught up a little bit, some of the tribal knowledge, I'll say, of what had been used in the building. That was appreciated. I think other folks were receptive and I think understand that my intentions are to be a long-term positive community partner. There were some additional options that they had shared. But ultimately, if they wanted to rescind their letter, if they would, but it's also a representative of what felt like 17 people. It was the first time I met the bid. I expressed to them that it probably would have been well received if someone would have just knocked at my door and said, welcome to the community. And but I said, that's water, under the bridge. Let's reset. And a lot of people had different opinions about it and good information for me. So I took it as an overall positive on that. And I understand that some people would like to see that remain retail. But again, I would say I'm also an owner that's going to be operating within that space. My background really isn't within retail. And there are some factors at play, like with the loss of parking and the public parking at play that does impact whomever is going to be owning that building or the surrounding buildings, quite frankly, that have to be taken into consideration. And that's less than ideal if you're going to operate a brick and mortar that's going to be under, road construction, for example. You can make it work. I'm not saying that's the reason not to do it, but it's a factor.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, if there are no questions from Mr. Burkholz, I would take comment from the plan commission at this time. Open it up to discussion or a motion.
Talk about the standard. This is the second rezoning topic we've had since we did the new zoning plan. I feel like we're gonna get into this pattern where everyone who is not in a fairly strong are looking at the zoning maps of MX1 or GX1 are gonna make an appeal. And I'm in a situation where I'm not a policymaker. I'm gonna say yes, I'm gonna go to the village board and you're gonna get inundated with a lot of requests. I guess I'm just kind of asking, is that what you want? Not you? Or
Right.
like our trustee representatives here, I'm like, I don't have enough facts here to seeing that this is the positive one way or the other.
Well, I might, unless you're eager to respond, I might sort of take that as a rhetorical for now and hear what the other commissioners have to say. And then I'm happy to share my position as well. But-
Yeah, I mean, I guess my view, just to respond to that question is, I guess I don't have a very principled answer other than to say, our job is to kind of look at these case by case and, the one that came to us, a year ago, the condo office to be rezoned. I just kind of looked at it and thought, well, it's been vacant for 2 years. We might as well just change it. I want to be flexible. Sort of just make it easier for people to do business here. But then I look at this one and I look at, that little location there. There's not really a lot of properties like that in Shorewood. Sometimes we have really large spaces that sit vacant for years and years until somebody with enough money can come in and rent it. And that one, I feel like, somebody opening up a store or a restaurant or whatever, that's not a huge space. I can't imagine it'll be that expensive. So I kind of want to just keep that one as it is. And so I feel like as a trustee, I would kind of look to this group to kind of have more expertise on that and kind of be able to take testimony and hear both sides of each issue and then make a recommendation. But that's just kind of how I do it, other than I don't really have a good answer, like I said, other than to say, I think we got to sort of look at it case by case.
I could just interject, people like options, not ultimatums. And if I had the option to have office and retail and like a restaurant space along with, which really my business is within rentals, apartment rentals and so on, that'd be great. It's just that there was no temporary option here, in between. And it's kind of like if there's not a perfect solution here for it. My sort of just personally, as the owner of the building, retail is sort of the least of my interest, if you will, within the space, given the condition. That doesn't mean that someone couldn't look at that space and say, oh, this could be, someone had a passion for retail development it would be successful in there. And I am looking at other options and so on for restaurants and things like that. And there are some negatives, honestly, to even rezoning to where you can have 25% of the space for restaurants and things like that. It's just, and the feedback I honestly got that I took from the bid district meeting was that when I got there, they had felt some degree of, I don't want to say frustration, but that they were getting inundated with sort of zoning requests. And they kind of felt like the study in 2023 was the study, and they just felt like we don't want to look back because we've already spent this amount of energy in it. But to somebody that's new to the community that doesn't understand that and just kind of walks into that, and there's already been this sort of, two sides of opinions on it, to kind of go in and say, hey, really, I hear you, but I need office space here as well. It's just, it didn't allow for that without a significant amount of additional investment, which I'm willing to do, luckily, but I can't imagine that everyone's in that same position. So just sort of the feedback that I've got from being here, I'd love to already have been open and going through this process. And like I said, whatever decision is made is going to be respected, because I honestly believe even the people that don't agree with it being for office are coming from the best case, best intentions. So I genuinely believe that, and I've had the opportunity to kind of go through and listen to all that. But it would be better if there was some other language maybe in there that could allow for these situations to kind of play out or breathe a little bit more, even like a temporary occupancy or something along those lines. To revisit and kind of go through what I've gone through for the past 6 months would have been helpful, and maybe taken,
Yeah, if I may, I think that's helpful feedback, but I want to stay within scope for tonight. I see, Commissioner Klein would like to be recognized.
Yes, obviously I was not here in 2023 when this started. I'm sure it was a huge venture. Not having been that one, I've been in a few of those myself. But at the same time, I think for us to say as a community that we figured the zoning is what it is and you can't change it, I think property owner has a right to ask. And given that it complies with the comp plan, it's consistent with the zoning, in my mind, what's the rational nexus for saying no? Now, I'm not a land use attorney, although I've been beaten up by a few. And there may be something else if you're a village attorney, but I just don't know how in good conscience I could vote against this gentleman's request.
I think when we did the zoning, though, we talked about, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but we talked about the fact that, hey, if people are affected by these zoning changes, there's a lot of things we can do. I mean, I know you didn't understand the zoning, but the property was bought with the zoning in place that has it now. I have a couple questions from the packet. The letter of support, I understood. The letter against it, was that from the current tenant?
He was the tenant before, not the most recent, but the one before that, Just Goods.
Retail.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, but I'm just saying, like, so that was a while ago. It's not somebody. And then the bid, I know you touched on the bid, but the bid is against it. Your write-up made it seem like a lot of these ones, maybe I use it as a cheat sheet, but I'm like, okay, this is what staff thinks. I couldn't really tell what you thought by reading it. It was kind of like, yeah, we're in support of talking about this.
No, if I can respond, I acknowledge that, and that's why I've mentioned several times that this was flip-flopped back and forth in, what do we call it, task force, whatever it was. It went back and forth where the zoning consultant really wanted to focus on clusters where like uses could be clustered, right? So corners, multiple buildings in a row. So her initial draft showed this building as GX because there was no other MX around it. When the map was revealed, the working group, that's what it was, sorry, the working group looked at this building and said, we can't lose retail in this building. We only have so many buildings like this. It's a traditional storefront, et cetera, et cetera. Clusters are a good theory, but in this case, the working group, ultimately Plan Commission and Village Board agreed that this property was unique enough. If you're asking me, I don't have an opinion one way or the other because there's arguments on both sides, and I'm the staff liaison. I don't have the local resident policy lens, that the Plan Commission is supposed to represent. So as the village planner, I'm telling you, there's justification for both arguments.
Yeah,
That doesn't help. That doesn't help.
Well, I just wasn't on the working group.
Right,
And
okay.
all these pieces, I know you were involved with, so I'm just, wasn't the working. Bussin'. Okay.
And Barbara was.
Oh, and Barbara, you and Barbara, okay. This is your fault.
And keep them post.
Oh, you'd be at 3, okay.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, that answers my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Klein. would you
Yeah,
like
I'm
to-
just thinking, I've lived in Shorewood for 25 years. And I've watched that place be different things over the years. I think of insurance is kind of an office use, but it's retail enough that people are coming and going, I guess. Or it was before the commercial zoning update. And some of those businesses have gone on to bigger and better places, and some of them have, I don't know what happened to them, but they're no longer renting, right?
Just got goods went online.
Yeah, their models change. But I do hear that we have very few of these storefronts available around. And are they all being used in a way that really, that the bid would really like to see, it draws people in and gives them a place to go? But then I look at the map and I say, well, and I walk by and it's like big tall building with no engagement, and then this thing, and then big tall building with no engagement. So the experience as a pedestrian, you know, is, hey, that should be something fun. But if it's isolated and it doesn't work, and I take parking out of it because I think there's plenty of street parking. People want to go somewhere to go. So I'm kind of on the fence about it. Opportunity in one hand, let's fill our places with active things, you know, on the other hand, a little preserving the character of the village, the building that we have in College U.
Yeah, I think as the board, you guys have gotten a lot of flack for not preserving village character, not you guys necessarily, but over time.
Village board.
I know.
Can I do my hypothetical one more time? Just,
Yeah, and I can,
Oh,
I'm happy to
oh.
respond, but I don't wanna, it might,
no, it's just, you can, from the point, you can do this from both sides. If we change this to GX1 now, what would stop someone for the parcel sold to petition us to switch it back? And again, we're just gonna get into these situations where the purpose for the commercial zoning update was to simplify expectations so we could have the desired community feel. And I feel like we are just going back to bureaucracy where we make people come to a lot of meetings. And that is my concern. So thank you for hearing us.
yes.
I guess I would add to that, that zoning is not static. It's gonna change. You're gonna, property owners are just generally coming in and ask it. It's just gonna happen, you know? As you said, take these things on some merit. And you support what there's only wants.
Sounds like you might have a motion.
I feel transparency wise, I should,
Sorry.
speak a lot of times, you know, presidents and chairs, they'll kind of like hide behind their role or whatever. But I did support the other rezone, and I remember a lot of discussion around like, hey, what's the point of doing this zoning update if we're gonna, you know, within a year? But that application had a very unique set of circumstances, you know, different space, different implications. And so with this one, you know, so that aside, right, looking at this one case by case, stakeholder input, the zoning process was made up of a lot of stakeholders that didn't want to represent one of them. To everybody's point, a lot of effort and time and discussion went into the code that was approved. And I didn't agree with everything in the code. But I think this one I do agree with, and especially that, you know, Director Greenberg is recalling that there was a flip-flop even within the group and sort of how they came to it. I want to respect that, and I don't think that's the same as being static or inflexible. And then the bid, you know, not supporting this at this time and not changing their mind after a few conversations is significant to me. And as village president, there are so many times where we just, for whatever, well, I won't use that. I just, given all of these things, I am likely not to support this at this time. But happy to take it to the board. And I hear, you know, what it feels like as a new property owner too. And definitely if in the purchase process, zoning never came up. You know, I think that that is really unfortunate. At the same time, we did sort of pride ourselves on approving a zoning code that was easy to navigate, easier than before. So it's hard to hear that our efforts are not gonna work for everyone, that's for sure. So I think that, it's unfortunate, but it's not exactly the same as, it's not the same use discussion in my mind, given everything that we've been through and arrived here and the stakeholders involved.
Are you ready for a motion?
Mhm.
I think motion would be recommendation to the village board. I move that we recommend to the village board that we approve this, application to rezone.
Is there a second?
A second.
Motion by Commissioner Plain, seconded by Commissioner Pollock. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm not.
Aye.
So 1, 2, 3. Nay.
Nay.
So 3-3. So we just send it forward with a 3-3 split because it's going to go out of the commission either way. So we'll just, the board will hear it with public hearing with this recommendation, 3-4, 3 against, and either way I support our ordinance that it goes for public hearing at the village board. I think that's the right body to hear this.
Right, sounds good.
Welcome to Shorewood.
Somehow seems an appropriate result given
More bureaucracy.
the history.
My only, like I said, no matter what happens, I'm gonna make it work, so don't worry, I appreciate it. And for somebody that wants to do additional development, there's other parcels that I would like to be able to engage with bid and the board on. There's some that are pretty notable and I think could be great. My concern about this and really, when this does go, is the fact that I've had residents in that second unit that have been there for pretty much a decade. And I haven't, one of these has to kind of fall on break. So if I'm gonna have an office within there, that's on the second floor. And there's gonna be renovations in the building either way, so I wanna certainly know about the historical content and the character and keep all that, but that would be very difficult. That's not my intent. So. Thanks for all the input too, appreciate it.
And any further, other business items. But the
Yeah, I'll
department
actually,
is always open.
Okay. A few part two, so parts.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll before then, I'll get it. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Again, I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself on the way in. I was totally
No worries.
baffled by this. All right, moving on to item 4, further discussion of the plan commission's proposed initiative to increase housing opportunities in the village, accessory dwelling units. So this is coming back before us. The memo has additions in red, and we're the last for your guidance.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of additions to the packet. It was a pretty clear conversation last time that there was a lot of support for seeing how this could work in Shorewood. So once again, 3 possible types of ADUs, internal, attached, and detached. This is what we're discussing. They're not currently permitted in Shorewood, but historically they would have been, and or they're being reintroduced in a lot of zoning codes across the state and country. So ADUs are seen as a way to create and diversify housing options within existing neighborhoods, without drastic change from a single unit or 2 unit into like a 4-plex or larger. They're seen as a stepping stone into more gentle density. However, ADUs can be costly to create. The cost of labor and materials for a small unit is hard to pay off. Including utility hookups are very expensive that people oftentimes don't think about when they begin the chapter of looking into this. And as a result, they have not been widely adopted within the region. They've been permitted in Wauwatosa for several years. Only 2 have been constructed, and now they're actually offering incentives to make that work. And once again, they were recently reintroduced in Milwaukee. No data on that yet, but they're going to struggle with a similar issues that, Wauwatosa and we would face in terms of, how likely it'll be adopted in this particular housing, market region. So, we did discuss the comparative of Wauwatosa and Waukee. I won't go over them because that was discussed last time, but they're pretty generally the same. The pros are, once again, smaller units are typically more affordable for people to live in. They create opportunity for homeowner income, which allows you to stay in your house longer, perhaps. On the same site as you, to allow you to age in place. And once again, they're developed within the currently allowed footprint. So what a current, single unit house would be built in, an ADU would follow that same footprint in terms of setbacks, lot coverage. The cons, they do add another household unit to that same parcel, so there is additional parking that would be expected. And there were concerns voiced about short-term rentals and the difficulties of enforcement, which I think all communities in Wisconsin are facing if they're in a market that people want to, stay in for weekend stays, et cetera. Possible regulations, I've just highlighted. These are the same ones that you saw last time. I've highlighted the ones that have been perhaps discussed or seen as limiting. So 10% for an accessory structure that we've heard that challenge in the past with smaller lots and people wanting to have larger garages. If you have a 40 by 120 lot, you're at a 420 square foot footprint for that. That could be a pretty small unit when we allow for 1,000, right? So you're kind of limiting it by the percentage there. The same thing with the height, not to exceed 20 feet. That does keep in with the character of the neighborhood, but that does, limit the space that you could build if you're detaching it. And then the parking regulations are always going to be a struggle on small lots. So if you're requiring to maintain the existing, that means the first floor will need to be kept as a garage. You'll have to go above that. And then if you were to require any additional parking for that, you need to find additional space for that. So parking, once again, is a limiting factor for how successful these might be adopted in the village. And then I did just add the short-term rental prohibition. I'd be happy to add that in there. I did see that one community, Mount Pleasant, at least. I went to the planning conference recently and they discussed a lot of these regulations. Mount Pleasant just they restate the prohibition within the regulation just to remind people. They actually have people sign an agreement that's recorded with the property. I think that goes a little further than administratively, I think I would recommend, but restating it doesn't hurt, that stays under 7 days are prohibited. So that hopefully would at least discourage people from thinking that they could do this without being challenged. And then since at the last meeting, there was discussion of whether or not these exist within the community. The only ones that staff can think of are on Lake Drive, the traditional, coach house kind of developments. But within our neighborhoods, we do have people that have renovated their garages with second units within the current context of the zoning code. So this is on Newton. They extended it above just for storage space. So it's finished space above. There's no plumbing, things of that nature. But essentially, this could have been a 560 square foot unit. Had the village allowed it, to my knowledge, we've received no complaints over this being added to the back of the property. It looks quite nice if you ask me. So
Is that within the 20 feet?
yeah, it is. So we measure, so this is 20 foot here, but currently accessory structures allowed to be 15 feet at the midpoint of the ridge of the roof. So between the ridge and the eave. And so the 15 feet is here and the 20 feet is here. I did put it in the packet, you probably couldn't read it. It's very small. I did pull it up. So yes, this was built without variance within the context of the current zoning code. So I thought this was one quite relevant example of what this might look like in a neighborhood. If people want to drive by and see it, it's on an alley, so there's no problem, getting back there to see it. So, but yeah, we don't have a lot of, unless someone can tell me, maybe you don't want to tell me, we don't have a lot of existing ADUs that are being occupied by residential units. So we have storage space and we've got some traditional ADUs on Lake Drive, but nothing really in the neighborhoods that we can staff at this point to. So next steps, we're here to discuss any possible refinements, those regulations. I pointed out some possible sticking points, additional questions for research. Happy to continue to look into things. Once again, I mentioned I was at the planning conference last week in La Crosse. Almost every community was looking at the same topic. All of us kind of acknowledging that it's not going to be a huge game changer in terms of what it's going to do, but it does provide options or opportunity. And so we just want to make sure that we're adopting regulations that aren't, prohibiting that type of opportunity. And then we would perform public outreach. I think in the packet, I did offer a week in November that I thought would line up well in terms of giving us one more month to confirm any further discussion. And then I had the week of November 10th identified either on Tuesday the 11th or Thursday the 13th At which point, staff can put together an open house with all 4 topics being discussed. So back to the household definition, ADUs, duplexes, which we'll talk about later, and then one of like the other one, the bedrooms and basements, which I would imagine should be a no-brainer. But so yeah, we would kind of hold an open house for that, and then any other ideas that the community wants to share with that, I could bring that back to the plan commission at your November meeting, and then we can hopefully start crafting some things for recommendation for the village board next year. So public outreach, we'd have in-person meeting. We also have opportunity for comments through either a poll or village manager memo that's been successful with the transportation stuff recently. So we can definitely work on that and discuss that next meeting in more detail if you'd like. Draft code updates, public hearing, village board consideration. So this is kind of where we're at. If you have additional questions or thoughts, I'd be happy to hear them. I'll go bach to this household regulations page, which maybe will guide some additional conversation. But if not, I don't really have much to add to this. It's a pretty standard ADU kind of package. It's just a matter of whether or not this works within Shorewood's context and if there's other things that we should tweak to make it more unique to us.
Okay, well, I think it makes sense to respond to the regulations as presented in front of us and then figure out where to go from there.
Yeah, with the regulations and also that chart you made, first of all, I thought this was great. I think that, again, a hybrid between Tulsa and Milwaukee for us, just on the surface seemed better. Like one thing I thought that I liked Milwaukee had that Tulsa didn't was the owner occupancy requirement at time of creation. So again, that's not someone who's just trying to pop rental units to make money. That's someone that lives here already and is like, hey, I could either use the extra income, I could have some family stay there, or long-term, I want to rent it. So that's the intent of that, I think, in Milwaukee is correct.
Correct, yes. So absolutely landlord.
So I did like that. I did like the maintain existing parking that Tosa had. I know you had that in your thing there.
If I could just ask a question on that. When we talked last month, that didn't include the garage,
Which one, sorry, the,
maintaining the existing parking.
so Wauwatosa requires you to maintain existing parking for your unit, but not for the ADU. Milwaukee doesn't have parking requirements for single and 2-family houses, so that's not relevant in their case.
Does the parking in the garage count?
Yes.
Okay, that was under a different understanding.
Oh, I thought
You could convert your whole entire garage.
So right now, the village parking requirements for a 1-unit house is that you have to have an enclosed parking space. So that requires at least,
So that's considered parking.
right, so if you can split that somehow and have one on the bottom and, an entryway mudroom or something going up, possibly, but you do have to, under the current regulations, unless we were to discuss relaxing them, you have to have one enclosed parking space.
Okay, so to your question, like if you have a garage and you build like that one there on top of it, you're still maintaining the parking. You don't have to create additional.
Correct. That is what Wauwatosa has. That's what the current regulation says.
Just remember, you just have to maintain the parking space. It doesn't mean you can't live in the parking space. This is where I'm like,
Or in your car.
but
I don't know about that. I don't think building code
You
would be the same for,
So if I had a 2-car garage, I could take half of
you
it
could, correct.
and the upstairs.
okay,
But you wouldn't be maintaining existing parking then. You'd be getting rid of one
You'd be
parking.
maintaining your required parking.
in code.
So that's.
But in practice, I feel like you're gonna.
Very clear about that.
So I think that
If I had a
it's
3-car
gotta be
garage,
worded differently.
Correct, yep, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So, if,
I'm fine with maintaining the code.
Maintaining-
For enclosed.
okay, I
If
appreciate
someone
that.
has 3-car garage and they want to take an ADU on it, 2/3 of it.
That's correct. Yep, that's a good point.
And you use I'm just going through, you use the square footage, you did something 1,000, or why is this one 1,000 or 1,300? That seems weird to say.
So Milwaukee has, I believe they have 2 different zoning codes where it's in, and so it's 1,000 within one zoning code and 1,300 within a different residential district.
You just took down a note on a requirement. Are we discussing that further, or you're going to propose to move base?
I'd be happy to hear more discussion on it if you want to. I was taking direction to change my language from existing parking must be maintained to existing minimum parking requirements must be met or something of that nature. I know there's other opinions in the room that would like to get rid of them, so I'm not here to,
Okay, that's.
I'm not here to say that we're done with that conversation, but at the very least, my intention of presenting this draft was incorrectly worded.
For the purposes of, just order, if we go person by person, and if you have a response to what somebody is saying, we can go back for it for wider discussion. Just to be, you still have the floor. Chris.
I just have one more thing, and then the other thing, you didn't have it in yours, but I thought TOSA had this, I don't understand the point of it, about the entrance location requirement, like it can't be on the side, which seemed dumb to me. Cause sometimes you might want it on the side, I get why not on the side of the neighboring property, but why do they have it not on the?
Yeah, I don't know, that's why I didn't carry it through.
Okay, yeah, my opinion on that was Milwaukee had it right, TOSA had it. Maybe someone had some reasoning, but.
Correct.
We
And
have all kinds of side doors on residential.
Right,
lots,
that's what
so
I was
that
trying
would
to
be-
analyze that.
Right.
Okay, those are my comments, but in general, I'm in favor of this, I think. TOSA having two, you said. I mean, I don't think we're rewriting the book here, but again, if we're losing potentially one space somewhere, it's nice to create a space somewhere else.
I mean, I kind of look at all these different regulations and how these has actually played out in the communities that have done it, like TOSA has done 280, Madison has done 32 in the last 12 years, even though they're 20 times the size of us. And the average cost of 180,000, like, I think the whole purpose of this is to help get more housing in Shorewood. And I think we should just be focused on that problem and not add on all these other things that make it even more expensive, like requiring you to maintain parking. I mean, like, we're probably gonna have maybe 2 of these in Shorewood, or maybe 5 of these in Shorewood over the next 5 years. Like, we're not gonna really lose a bunch of parking if we do ADUs without requiring them to keep meeting the parking minimum or having indoor parking. I mean, it's just all these things that are, like the green space requirement, I like that. That sounds nice, but like every one of these little things has the effect of making it harder to actually do one of these on top of having to do $180,000 out of pocket. So I'd like to move this to the board, as a whole, and have the public comment on the whole process and everything, but just, I think, both as a village board and as this group, as this committee, we should be focused on, why are we in the first place, and that's to try to get more housing, let people have more flexibility for their family situation, and just try to stay focused on that. And then just one sort of research question I had is there any way to kind of find out like how much is building one of these cost in communities that require you to maintain parking versus that don't have that requirement? Because I could just see requiring a parking pad, that would be like, I don't know, this extra 5 or 10,000, something like that.
yeah, I mean, we could quantify what it costs to traditionally build or maintain a parking space, and that shouldn't impact the cost of the ADU, outside of that. But yeah, we have plenty of garage and parking, permits that come through that we could provide an average of what that runs in Shorewood.
Yeah.
Just for reference, so if when we public engagement, when we have that parking piece, we could kind of put that out there as, data in terms of.
Alternate, like a rider on a contract, like this aspect.
Like, of course, everyone wants parking, but then you see what it really costs, and you're like, okay, well, maybe that doesn't have to be.
What is it?
I'm done. Go ahead.
So I share your enthusiasm for trying to make this easy for people who want to try to create more space for folks. I'm curious about what you were trying to get at with the parking space. The way I was thinking about this is what we're really trying to regulate here is the cost per square foot, because that's what you're affecting. If you can use the potential parking space, your cost per square foot would go down if you could use that space, whereas your cost per square foot would go up if you could. Is that?
Yeah, that's part of what I'm getting at, is that like, maybe you have a giant driveway and you want to put your ADU on that driveway. But if you have to maintain all the existing parking spaces, then you can't do that. Or maybe if you want to put a unit above your garage, but I can envision a circumstance where you're like, okay, I want to build one additional unit on my house, but now I have to build some other parking, like pave over part of my lawn, have a parking pad, or, you know, I want to use the garage for housing, but instead I'm required to use it for storing a car in there. So I just feel like there's having all this additional parking requirements can drive up the cost in different ways.
And one other option would be, so right now we require the enclosed space, but to the point of having a driveway. If the village would allow you to just park your car in the driveway, you're still having off-street parking for that, right? It's not a pad per se, but like,
It's not closed.
right, it's not enclosed, so a middle ground could be. You know, if you have a driveway, you can have an ADU without having that indoor space. So right now we require the indoor space, and many people have driveways that they could park on outdoor, not going onto the street, so.
And they do already.
And they do already,
Use the
correct.
Garage for storage.
So it's just matching reality in that respect. So, I think there is a third option within there. I jotted that down, for, you know, additional public input on that.
Would that be a separate code, or is that within the residential code?
It's in the zoning code.
Zoning.
We'd have to obviously update that particular section to say. you
Got
know,
it, so that's consistent.
Yeah,
Can I reframe the spectrum that we just talked about to make sure I'm understanding?
Yep.
Okay, so on one end of the spectrum, just making this the maximalist on the parking side, you could require an additional parking space for the ADU. The next one is to maintain the current enclosed parking requirement for the household initial structure on the land. The one we just talked about was getting rid of the enclosed requirement. And then the maximalist on the other side would be no parking requirement for any units. That's the full spectrum.
correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Say the last one again, please.
You could remove even if you were making an ADU on a house, you could say that there's no parking requirement for the entire property.
Yeah, that's what
That's like the maximalist on the other
Yeah.
side of the spectrum.
We have such a range of driveway space. Funny, in my neighborhood, you can't even get a car between,
like a horse carriage.
between the garage and the sidewalk, cars are always hanging over. You know, but-
That's
And
a
then there's
foul.
other ones.
And then
that are
there's
90 feet.
alleys, yeah.
So if you built an ADU in that garage. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Can you make a note of that?
I don't know if I'm missing the new one.
So if I lived in an alley,
Yep,
right, and I want to turn my garage into an ADU and you allow me to not have to maintain indoor parking space? I now have 5 feet, I can park a car sideways in my alley.
so we have minimum space requirements, so you wouldn't be allowed to park in that apron, is that essentially?
People do.
People do, I mean, and they should be getting tickets if that's an issue, obviously, but in terms of the zoning review, when we would look at it, we would say, depending on what the regulations are. If you were required to have an off-street outdoor space and you identified that to be there, we would say that's not compliant with the minimum space requirements. I will remind you all that the code does allow special exceptions to come to the plan commission to discuss whether or not a particular property should be exempted from things, so.
Yeah.
That bureaucratic option will always be there, but the goal would be to not, you know, require that at all times, but to the point of. If the space, and I'd have to look at the code, I believe it's 9 by 18 or something, I think is the technical. If it doesn't meet that, then you're not checking that box and you'd have to. You know, either get an exception or relocate it somewhere else.
And then by the same token, in the example of a really narrow driveway, if somebody has an oversized vehicle that doesn't fit in their garage to begin with, so they don't use it, then, and they propose that their parking space would be on the driveway, but it abuts an adjacent property with grass that would exceed the width of the driveway or create access issues, then the zoning code would pick that up.
If the requirement were that you had to have an off-street space, we would require that a site plan be provided that shows that you have the space for that.
And we define the space, and then your car is that person's choice.
Right. Yep.
Interesting.
We're talking about,
Come on, Josh's parking.
Yes.
Real quick. You said something that stuck with me there. I think that from the parking standpoint, though, the reason why they probably have maintain existing and not the regulations having one spot is because not only are you then maintaining the existing parking, but if you have an ADU, you're bringing a new person there that requires potentially, right, additional parking. So if you displace your parking and then add more parking needs to it, granted, this could be only 2 of these or 1 of these or none.
Yeah.
But again, for a neighbor, that could be significant in going up in parking needs on the street and things like that very quickly in a small community.
I'm still not sure about the harms there.
Well, so bring it back to the policy level. I like the approach of when this goes for public comment, that you're showing sort of a range of parking considerations.
Yeah.
I do, from my experience, anything left of center is gonna be like a deal breaker public wise, because we can't even agree on, what we have. So I'm not saying that, I just think we should lay out all the options and.
So should we have a spectrum kind of for all of the dimensions we think are important and say like,
Mhm.
and then,
I think this is the only one that's coming up in this group right now is the, parking.
let's definitely grab the attention, so.
Yeah, exactly. My comment is neither here nor there. It's just a reference to the sort of bellwether. Or kind of where I think the public is. But that's for the village board to, not for us. Are there, yes.
Yeah, so I think on a couple of these, they would be good to have just again, some dialogue on the options rather than just anchoring to what's here. So like the green space requirements, existing lot coverage ratios. I think there again, we might want to say like, hey, where do we get the extremes so you can really understand what this might mean, right? And how that might influence the cost per square foot. And then setbacks, I feel like are pretty standard. I'm not sure about the principal. Again, this is something I think we could spectrum out. Not sure why it needs to be in feet.
Oh, you mean it could be closer? Yeah.
The 10 feet from the principal building, that's a building code issue.
Is it building? Okay, so there we go.
So you can get an exception to be 5 feet if the walls are fire rated. But yeah, that's a building code issue.
Great, so this is like,
Yep.
if you're a person who's building an ADU, you probably are thinking about what you and the people that are gonna occupy this space need. I just want to make it simple that you have the full spectrum of options for us to consider.
And I think with respect to the 10%, which is why I added that, like, so you get 10% for your accessory structure, 30% for your principal structure. If you're not using your full 30% for principal structure, an argument could be made that perhaps you can go up to 15% for your accessory structure, because you're still within the total 40% envelope. So that's kind of where these options could go. So if you maximize your principal structure, then you only get the 10%. But if you have, I mean, that's something I think public feedback might be interesting to hear what that is about. Or if people really want to say it's accessory, I don't want it to be ever bigger than 10% of a lot, then you have that. But if the goal, to Trustee McGovern's point, if the goal is more housing units and that can get you there, that's something that could be compromised on.
I actually stuck around for something, but like, because the initial comment was about this just being for single family primary homes only. And as someone who's not reflected of this, I would like to just state my thoughts that I would like that expanded. Other than the property we just discussed, which has flat roof and 4 parking spots, it's gonna have to be redone. And I might have to lose additional housing units due to some of the zoning. And I would definitely consider an ADU above lot on the property we discussed at 44, 49, 44, 53. I'm not a homeowner, as a primary residence within Shorewood, but I would just point back out that given that option for properties that I do own within Shorewood, I would provide and build and invest in additional housing units, rental units. That would be actually helpful, even though I'm not a primary. Well, I just wanted to make mention of that.
And I appreciate that. And I mean, to the point of the zoning code being, easy as 1, 2, 3. I need to double check this, but in the commercial districts, you can have 2 principal buildings. So technically, I think you probably already could do that in the commercial district. Because you could have two mixed-use buildings on a parcel. In the residential districts, you only allowed to have one principal, one accessory. So let me double check that, but I know when we did the commercial zoning update, that did come up, and I believe it's pretty clear that any parcel in the commercial zoning district can have more than one principal building, as long as you meet the setbacks, et cetera. So that door might have already been opened in, the commercial district. So
Would that be the case with the duplexes as well, though?
That will be the next item. on the agenda.
in the duplexes,
So we are looking at, so just for context here, so your property that you came tonight for is in the commercial district, so different zoning. This is the first time that we're looking at residential districts to see what we could update. And we're only looking at certain things that sort of are lower hanging fruit, if you will. But it's certainly not the end of what we would like to see happen over the course of the next few years. So you may have comments that don't exactly pertain to the code that we're looking at, but it doesn't mean that it won't be looked at in the future.
but you do have duplexes in the village as well, right? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah.
So yeah, you have, I know of at least one commercial property, one duplex, you might have more, right? So, the duplex property is probably zoned R1 through R6, and that currently does not allow that second living unit outside the principal building. So that is relevant to this. The commercial property that you own, I believe, probably already could, approve an accessory dwelling unit.
I just know in the case of one of the duplexes that I have, I could actually provide additional parking and additional living spaces within what is sort of the inefficient parking space. So I would be receptive to that if it was allowable.
I think we can note that, but for the purposes of our discussion, we might want to, you're,
Yeah, that's what I
as
said.
property owners, you're gonna have a lot of more specific examples that can be helpful, but we want to stay on in scope for our discussion.
So if we just, do we want to go through these step by step? Would you
Yeah.
prefer a note? Like, I don't want to,
Oh.
I know we have other topics for today and. Well. So the same thing on, I would say height. I think, as we've seen from the creative, design of the garage you showed on Newton, I feel like that was a pretty creative way to get into the, what is it, the grade to peak of roof? Why not just make it easy and then we don't have to have people.
Well, yeah, so my recommendation would be to make it to the peak of the roof. So that's why I have that in the parentheses, because it does get
Technical.
loopholey for some people, right, in terms of like what pitch they use and things of that nature. So if the intention for the village is to regulate how tall it is in the backyard so people don't have to see or whatever it is, I think regulating the peak makes more sense. And that example, that is 20 feet, so that's where you're coming from.
So again, on our spectrum, right, you could have the current requirement, like the far extreme. You could have this reduced requirement, or we could create some maximum height not to exceed. It seems like the gamut of our options. Okay. Design approval from. I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure what that means in terms of practicality.
We have to do that for all, I think they do that for everything
You
anyway.
do that, correct, the village does that for any exterior modification, so, in our case, I think that's actually good that we have that, because then we don't have to worry about writing entrance requirements and writing material requirements. We push that to the experts who will be able to hopefully answer that question without needing additional intricacies within this particular code.
It was the guidelines I was referring to.
Yeah, and that's always their option. I can tell you, the current board does not exercise that option because they like to have the freedom of design, right? So, yeah, if they were to choose to adopt guidelines, the code does allow them to adopt those guidelines.
And I can see that, so I'm not playing devil's advocate, I'm just playing the policymaker of what, like, there's part of me that says, I like this tabletop exercise. Moving forward, I could see it backfiring if we create too liberal a policy option, that it just doesn't go anywhere. But that's for another day. In terms of the DRB, I could see the peak. I think it would be interesting to me to see if what they're trying to avoid are flat roofs versus peaked roof, just from a design like character thing. I have no opinion on it, but that's what I'm just, I guess what we should focus on is whether this is standard language, because our ordinance says that the DRB can create guidelines.
And the DRB would not be, creating guidelines on the envelope. So once again, setbacks, height, that is in the zoning code that we review before we take it to DRB. So
Got it.
that would be this body's recommendation to the board to adopt an envelope within which you can design. And then they could choose within that guideline, like I think I have more Watosa example, like they require you to have the same siding material or something of that nature. I don't know if that's something that the village and or our DRB would advocate for, but I'm guessing that was a request back in 2019 to make sure things are more cohesive. Now that discourages you from a unique modern cube in your backyard that I think some DRB members would be excited about, right? So I don't see them creating very stringent guidelines based on the current setup of the board. They like to entertain options and allow people to express, their own architectural style, so.
And then that brings us to parking, which has already been established. And then the short-term rental prohibition, I agree with stating that.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to once again provide this back to you in October with those ranges.
Mhm.
And then from that, I can develop, an online survey and in-person materials that just kind of make those points clear and get feedback on those specifically, so that in November, we can come back and, by consensus, at least give you some guidance on how to move forward. So I think we're in a good place with this one.
I think so too. Thank you. That sounds like a good plan. We can close this item and move on to the next. And any further thoughts that, when you're driving home or whatever, the minute we adjourn, you can email those in writing and they'll make it.
Always please do,
I
yes.
know one on a garage. I just need to bike around.
Okay. We'll use you however we can.
Just back.
Can you build one if you have chickens already?
Right?
Whoa.
Later.
Getting personal.
I was bored.
No.
I'm gonna go see if I can turn the air conditioning on, because I'm also hot. And
Yeah.
I know the button is in the other room. We got one more item and
Can I say goodbye, break? I haven't had a break.
I'll get some water.
Yeah, but we'll be complaining about that. Well, we're never gonna be here again, right? This was it.
I hope not.
We've been in here before.
I know, but I think I've never liked it.
You think
you've never liked it?
Why do you not like this?
It's just kind of like, I don't know, I like sitting at that thing and playing with my microphone. I have the public behind me, so I can't just play on Twitter.
what's that?
This one feels so folksy.
I have no problem with the room. I'm just saying it's cooler in their rooms. I think
They still going.
they're still going.
I always wonder if this fireplace still works.
I think it definitely could. I don't know that it's actually,
Foot and stuff in there.
I mean, birds occasionally get in there, so
Yeah,
it's open to something.
it'd be nice and cozy for winter movie.
Or in my mouth. No one joined, I don't have a waiting room, so if you could have joined, it's right in. I'll show you pausing the recording.
Some vamping.
Are you worried I'm gonna say something inappropriate?
I think we did
It's
technical,
better when.
we took a technical break. So.
Anyway,
I never wanted those.
I have restarted the recording and go to. Let's get screen share. So this is the last of the identified housing initiatives. Obviously, there can always be more, but these are the ones that were listed in the sheet that we provided to the village board that they gave us approval to work on. This one relates to the existence of duplexes. So in the current code 535-19F, which defines the R6 1 and 2 household district. It was created in 1957 as an amendment to the 1956 code. Before that, the village previously allowed 2-unit dwellings within all of its residence districts. So up until 1957, any R district would have allowed 1 or 2-unit development. So duplexes were neighborhood fabric. And this below here is just a land use map that just shows how they're historically have been, interspersed within the neighborhood. Once again, in 1957, they were carved out to be single family or 1 unit and 1 and 2 units. So there was a push towards limiting the amount of new duplexes that could be developed. There we go. So this is just the old language. So that said, any residence district, except in the residence district, no trade, business, or industry shall be carried on, and no building or land shall be used, and no building erected or structure or altered, except for the use of a private home or the residence of not to exceed 2 families. So once again, this is just the old code language that said duplexes were part of the fabric of the neighborhood. This is the zoning map of 1956, and can't see that obviously, but there's only 1 residential district. Then there's Estabrook Homes, there's Lake Drive, there's apartments, and then 3 business districts. But all of the quadrant, neighborhood uses that we see here were zoned residential, which allowed that 1 or 2 unit building to be built. This is that ordinance in 1957, ordinance 775, that's carved out a new single family district as opposed to a 1 and 2 family district. The maps were updated then accordingly to identify where those boundaries were to be. And then in 1983, as part of a recodification of the zoning code, there was specifically added a prohibition of new duplexes in the duplex district. So in 1957, they carved out a district that said no more duplexes in this neighborhood, or in these zones, I should say. And then in 83, they said, and no more duplexes in any 1 or 2 unit zone. So the minutes of that plan commission meeting from January 5th, 1983 say Jim Lynch said his recollection is that the plan commission decided not to extend the single family residence district into the present 1 and 2 family district, but to prevent conversions from single family residence to 2 family residences by creating a prohibition in the zoning code against such conversions. So that's as much of the history as I could find on it. It comes from 1983. It's part of the discussion when they recodified the zoning code. And then here it says the subsequent meeting, a discussion followed regarding the need to maintain single family dwellings and prevent the conversion of single family dwellings into duplexes. Mr. Mann, who I believe was a plan commissioner, voiced this concern related to the absentee landlords and problems of maintenance of property due to such ownership. It was pointed out that 2 family structures are more economic than single family residences, that they are prone to generate the need for more parking spaces. So these are just kind of the same issues that we're discussing, as it ever was, right? So they did ultimately motion to add that prohibition, which now currently says it shall be unlawful to construct a 2-family dwelling on any vacant lot upon which no prior dwelling has been constructed, or on a lot previously occupied by a single family dwelling. So you can't create a new duplex and you can't convert a single family duplex in the duplex district. So that's just kind of always been kind of a confusion on my part, that the history that I was searching for all morning, that I kind of like that stuff. So I appreciated the exercise. But then back to our initiative, one of the guides that we were looking at was the CNU's Enabling Better Places, a user guide to Wisconsin neighborhood affordability, where this essentially recommends that you should look back to your historical zoning patterns and at the minimum enact those, and before you even consider going above them. So this would say that if you had a district that allowed duplexes and duplexes exist, that your zoning code should consider matching that. So not saying that's what we have to do, but that's kind of one of the guides that we were looking at in doing this. So the question comes down to, should the village allow duplexes to be built or converted in its existing 1 and 2 household residence district? That zero requests for that. But we do get requests for conversions from duplexes into 1 unit building. So that is way more common. So then I guess the question is, do you want to open up, do you want to allow duplexes? If you do, I don't think that we're going to have much development based on that. Another question would be, should the village consider prohibiting the conversion of duplexes into 1 unit dwellings? Now that to me is a more hot topic, but with respect to this conversation, I think that's where the questions are in my head. This is the first time I'm hearing your perspective on it, so I appreciate that we might have more questions to go through before public engagement, but we've got tonight and then the meeting in October to kind of go through those. It's kind of a simple discussion, but there could be a lot of questions about it, so I will turn it back over to you, President McKay.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to hear initial reactions from the commission.
So I'll start simple. Why wouldn't we change all our zoning to be, like, why have a single family zone area and a duplex zone area? Make them all be either.
So that's what it was, to your
Yeah.
point, and
We
it's some,
changed it.
in 1957 and 1983, it was tightened down both times, presumably upon pressure from whether it's absentee landlords
Yeah.
or the impacts of
That's
multiple
one of the
units.
things we could propose.
Totally.
That's like the easy, open the door.
Yep, so in terms of the spectrum that we talked about last time, that could be a question that we ask, and we could see whether or not there's appetite for that.
Because that would be the ultimate historical alignment, would be to go back to just
Right.
one residential. And then the
Yeah.
middle would be restore the option of duplexes in the duplex
Yeah.
district.
Because there's some overlap between ADUs and duplexes. What's the difference? Just because it's.
So I talk about that too, yeah, so
Yeah.
a duplex has two similar sized units, whereas an ADU has one that is always defined to be smaller, so to me, it's the same language, but I've been told by all the planning things I go through that they are
Rather
different.
than using the word duplex, multifamily.
Right. 2 unit, right?
Yeah, well, we actually do have in our code, it's pretty specific what multifamily is, what 3 and above,
3 and above.
which is kind of interesting.
We have single unit, 2 unit, and then multi-unit is 3 and above.
Would the ADUs be that big of a problem? I mean, most of our, most of our villages are R6 already.
R5 and R6 are the 2 main districts. R5 is the single unit that's more of the east side closer to Lake Drive, but then R6, yes, is the majority of residential districts. But
So say your point again.
Well, I just feel like, I mean, if you're a single family and you're putting on an ADU, I mean, most of our village residential is R6 anyway, so if that could be 2 dwellings anyway, so.
so once again, there is a technical difference between a duplex and an ADU.
Right, no, I get
So
that, I'm just
that's
saying, there's not
correct,
really.
Yep. So it is kind of a similar conversation, just a more comparable housing unit would be allowed.
I don't think we should prohibit converting duplexes to 1 unit dwellings. I mean, I think that lowers property value potentially. I just don't think that's.
Give people the option.
Yeah, if you want to convert a single family back to it, that's expensive, but again, if you're willing to spend the money, then.
Other opinions, comments, questions? On question 1, question 2?
Bart, have we ever looked at, so I'm assuming this would come up when like somebody who's building a new home or, I mean, that, it seems like it would come up very rarely, like, cause you're probably not gonna tear down an existing single family home to build a duplex, or we don't even have that many tear downs in general, which I think good, but.
Correct.
Have we ever looked at maybe allowing somebody to go from a duplex to a fourplex? You know, some of the duplexes we have are kind of older and run down and not necessarily like historic looking, and, you know, they're owned by commercial property owners who would have resources to maybe do something like that.
So we have not done that. So in the introduction of the initiative, I said that if we wanted to do more missing middle, it would require a large discussion because I think it would impact our comprehensive plan with respect to what our definition of low density districts are currently. So I'd be happy to look into that, but we were focusing on these 4 things first.
Subsequent phase of
Yeah.
initiative.
Yeah, to answer your question, no, we have not looked into that, to my knowledge, never in my time, nor have I found it historically anywhere. But I do think that one would require more technical fixes. And then to those that were here when we did the comprehensive plan, we did ask that question with respect to the blocks adjacent to the commercial districts as to whether or not we would want to introduce the missing middle, and that did not advance out of the early stages, so. I guess maybe to your point, it was asked back in 2019 and it did not advance. I think it was pretty, dismissed pretty easily. Now, whether or not that's still the case or how it was presented, I guess I don't know, or I guess, could always be different, but, that was a discussion in terms of, how to buffer the starkness of the commercial district with the residential. And at the time, our consultant said that was an option and didn't catch legs.
I guess for the purposes of tonight, if we can focus on these two questions, and then we'll note that interest in a future initiative that would focus on missing middle. I think that would make the most sense.
And yeah, I can always have in the public engagement survey, in person, whatever, I can have an other, board with these other ideas and we can start gaining perspective on that, but I'd like to stick to the 4 that we at least identified and hopefully get some progress on those.
So general consensus on the answer to question 1. How many yeses, how many nos?
Yes,
In
and what-
favor of
Yeah.
changing?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so there's consensus to move forward on that. And then question 2, yeses and nos. I heard no. Is it consensus that we shouldn't prohibit?
No.
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 Agreed. So question 1, question 2,
We're good?
okay. Any other aspects of discussion on this? Oh, and is there anything? Okay.
Do we have an estimate of the current number of duplexes in the?
The comp plan should have that number. I can,
Thank you very much.
yep, the comp plan. I have that the map I've shared and I know that the numbers are in there somewhere as well. Could I just ask for, so I kind of posed that in the previous item about the public engagement meeting that we did that
Yes.
November.
Yeah,
Getting on a schedule or on a calendar better
Yes.
earlier than later would work. Is there any opposition to that particular week from anyone? I wouldn't expect. November 11th or 13th, I think were the 2 dates. I wouldn't require your attendance, but it is always helpful when I have, more people there, but I can make those dates. So as long as I'm not missing conflicts. What's the date? November 11th. Oh, wait, sorry. Let me look at that.
Not better.
11th or 13th.
Tuesday, the 11th or Thursday, the 13th.
Tuesday, the 11th is Veterans Day. Be sure that's not available.
I mean, we work on, or
You guys work on federal holidays?
we work on Veterans
Couple
Day.
floating holiday ones that
we probably shouldn't have it on a holiday event, and just because, even if we don't observe.
Appreciate your commitment.
So the 13th, I know I'm not available, but I don't, if there's not a conflict in the village.
And once again, you're not required to attend.
Exactly.
I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything that you guys might know about.
I won't be there, I'm sorry.
That's
I'm
fine.
disappointed.
We'll get a cutout of you.
Thank you.
Put it in a corner and have maybe stickers
The
that we can put on there.
chicken. Any other comments on 13th?
So I'm gonna proceed with planning to see if I can make that work internally with other staff and everything. If by chance I can't, I'll email you all perhaps for a poll or something, but I'm gonna go with that at the moment. Because once again, that aligns up. We have one more meeting to get our discussion cleared. And then we can have that and then come back in November or December if we don't want to meet the week of, if the week of Thanksgiving, if we don't have to. So just kind of want to get that on my calendar so we can plan for that. So that was my last question.
Yeah, thanks for putting all that together so that we can move ahead. I think it's a great goal, and if something changes in the meantime, we'll know and
Yep.
we'll respond accordingly. Thanks, everyone. Motion to adjourn? Oh,
question.
yes.
What will the village board receive regarding our action on rezone? I'm sure probably do a report, and as excellent as Crystal's minutes are, and should they get draft minutes or of this action?
We don't publish draft minutes. We'll publish a link to the recording. And the motion and the vote will be presented in the,
And I would submit that the village board ought to hear both sides of our
Yeah.
discussion, just my.
Could we, if they're labeled draft, just within the scope of, it's not an official posting, but it is a
I can ask the village manager in the past, we
Yeah,
shied away from that, but, I'm not opposed to it.
yeah,
Putting them in the materials.
Yeah.
yeah. I guess the other option is that they could be shared. I mean, we can figure, I appreciate the conversation and we could take care of housekeeping, but in other situations where we've gotten sort of unofficial or confidential, more internal focused information, they can be provided to the board ahead of time and not part of the packet if it's against our policy. But I agree with you.
The reason I ask is, if I see a 3-3 vote, I'm gonna, well, what?
Yeah, yeah. I would also say that while it is not required, I would welcome planning commissioners to attend because sometimes I have been in situations where the board has more curiosity than I feel comfortable. I don't want to be responsible for trying to recount everything and too. So, to the extent our meetings can be attended virtually, those are typically at the beginning of the meeting as well. Okay, anything else?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, I'll
Yep.
take that motion. Second? Second. All right, motion by Commissioner Woodland, seconded by Commissioner Klein. Any objection? Hearing none, we are adjourned at 7:59.
Great hanging out with everybody.
Yeah.